Welcome to the podcast series on sexual health for seniors with Dr Sue and Fran. This podcast series is based on conversations with seniors about sexual health, sexual desire and related matters. In this session, we will be continuing our discussion of Emma and her relationships. This is part 2 of Emma's story. Welcome, Fran.
Hello again, Dr. Sue. I can't wait to hear more about Emma. Once again, as I mentioned in the previous podcast, the issues that you've highlighted in the series resonate with me personally, and I'm sure many of the audience. One of the big bangers, I use that term quite loosely, the big bangers that hit me in reading Emma's story part 2 was to look at whether being needy fits with the idea of the mature relationships that I have in my mind. And searching for answers outside yourself. Those were really powerful when I was reading and I said, wow,
Yes.
So I'm really happy that those sort of concepts are generating thoughts within me, and I'm hoping that that's going to be one of the big bangers that's going to happen for our audience.
Thanks, Fran. All right, anyway, back to today's topic. You're with Dr Sue and Fran Carl, and we're talking about sexual desire in older age. And this session's narrative is about sexual desire from an older person's perspective, and our focus this week is part 2 of Emma's narrative.
Just to briefly recap, Emma was aged 68 years, had been twice divorced and had lived alone for several years, although she had had a few relationships after her second divorce. You can catch up with part 1 of Emma's story if you missed it the first time. Here is part 2 of Emma's story.
Emma reflected on her experiences by declaring,
There is a lot of emotion tied up in a relationship because, like when you were living with a man and you think you had intimacy, that you had love, that all the fantasy of what we believed at that time, then you're rudely shown that that man had absolutely no feelings for you and you are not important to him. I think in females we are still looking for that thing, that fantasy, that man that's going to protect us, that is going to care about us no matter how gross we look. We are still out there looking for whatever emptiness is inside, looking to fill it from there, and the truth is it will never come from there, ever.
Emma had lost confidence. Emma reflected that it was not until later in life that she felt that she had matured and was able to cope with life. Over the years, she developed her own coping mechanisms. Prior to that realisation, Emma said,
I felt like I was on a boat in the middle of the ocean and I had no steering and I was just floating in that direction and I had absolutely no control over it. And what I wanted was the control and the knowledge that I could actually cope myself.
As an older woman, Emma found her steering and gained control over her life. She had returned to the workforce when she was in her mid-40s. By the time she left her second husband when she was 56 years of age, Emma had achieved financial independence. Her determination to manage on her own was sustained by an earlier memory.
One time a friend said to me, what would it be like if you left your husband? What would it be like? All of a sudden I got this picture, and what it was a big corridor. And there were doors on either side, all the way along. And at the end there were double doors, which led to the outside. And so I started walking along this corridor, and I am walking along, and I'm throwing this door open, and I'm throwing that door open, and the sunlight is coming in and breeze, and it's just beautiful. Every door I opened was just glorious. And I walked in and I opened these 2 doors and I walked onto like a deck, and it overlooked a valley, and the sun was shining and the birds were singing. It was fantastic, and I thought, if I leave him, this is what it's going to be like. It's going to be so good. Everything is going to be right, and it was. As soon as I left him, it was like boom, boom, boom. Everything just fell into place, like it was all set up beforehand, and my mind must have known everything is going to be right.
Later, after she was confident with her own life but a little lonely, Emma decided to explore the internet. On one occasion, she flew interstate to stay with a man that she had met online, and while there were fortunately no issues regarding her safety, they simply did not gel, and by mutual agreement decided not to meet again. Emma said,
In the end, what I did that has worked really well for me is I use a vibrator. I found I don't feel a need for a man in my life while I'm using the vibrator. I think for a woman, a lot of your sexuality is in your imagination. I use it probably 3 or 4 times a week, and particularly if I want to go to sleep.
The vibrator started life as an innocent implement. It was a shoulder massager that was given to Emma as a remedy for arthritic pain, but she soon discovered the versatility contained in the device and put it to good use. Emma found that her sexual desire could be fulfilled. An added bonus to Emma was the knowledge that if the massager was found after her death, no one would realise its actual youth. Her dignity was preserved. Emma's perceptions about herself and about her sexual life had changed in older age.
I don't feel that there is anything a man can offer me. I mean, what if Mr. Right was standing there? What could he offer me that I haven't got? I have financial security and he is not going to make me feel safe. Really, what can he offer me? Like I have to be able to say to him, I don't want you to stay overnight. So I would be an awful hard person to get close to now, really. I have had a lot of women say to me, oh, I wish I had a man to go out with. Oh, it would be so nice if we could do this and that kind of thing sitting at the movies. And they say, I haven't got anybody like that. But I don't crave any of that anymore. I think a lot of my problems were due to my own neediness and looking for answers from the outside and negative bonding with people. I also think that sometimes relationships have a use-by date.
Yes. So, Fran, what do you think about that? We talked about loneliness in past podcast sessions.
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
So yes, and the friends of Emma mentioned, I wish I had someone to go out with and stuff. And I probably have said that myself, maybe in the earlier podcast. But there's a difference, I suppose, in looking for company because it's a fine thing to do, a happy thing to do, or trying to fill a sense of loneliness and you simply must have that person, otherwise you're not fulfilled. That was the feeling that I got from that. I'm really, really astounded, I suppose, by Emma getting to this point saying, I don't need them. I don't need them at all. I've got everything I need. Yeah. And I can't see myself getting to that point. But she's perfectly happy. Obviously, I don't want to trivialise the insights that Emma is giving us in terms of that feeling of neediness and that feeling of looking for answers outside yourself when she's saying they're really inside, myself or, yourself. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, that neediness that she was talking about.
And how many of us stay in relationships because we're frightened of what it might be
what
like.
the other side looks like.
That's right. And I guess that's the other powerful thing, really powerful thing that stood out as I was reading Emma's words, that the fear, you have to face that fear. Hey, obviously I'm not here championing the cause of breaking up marriages and all that sort of thing, not at all. But I do think that that's the one point that I took from reading out that was she had to look outside, and she's saying you need to look outside. That's something that's a step you need to take.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing was, for example, with the massager, it came to her as a gift.
Yes.
So it wasn't something that she had to go and purchase.
Very good point.
So it was kind of easier for her in that regard.
That's
as well.
right. So, going down to adult chaos, I don't know, I'd have to dress in a trench coat with a hat, I think,
I know.
Dr. Sue.
It's funny. I remember when my son was a teenager and he was going on his first outing with a girl. And I tell you what, in those days there was no condoms in the supermarkets. But I was at the chemist like a shot and I was asking over the counter, which nowadays I probably would... I'd be too embarrassed to do that. But because it was for my son, I was like a tiger, get whatever he needed. And I think that might be a problem for a lot of women as well, although you can order things online now.
Online, exactly, and they come in brown paper bags, I've been told.
Yeah, but it is a lot easier than having to go and front up to a chemist and buy a vibrator, for example.
Yes. And asking the questions, and I'm hoping that there'd be a drop-down boxes, menus on the website that say size or colour, or I don't know.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, the whole idea of online makes it much less confronting.
Yes. Look, there was another point to Emma's story that I must admit I did leave out of the written story, but she did tell me that she took that big bed with her when she left the marriage.
Oh,
and
right.
to her, that became her ocean, like her island in her bedroom, and that was hers.
Yes.
And it really, and as I said in the previous podcast, it was a symbol, it had a different meaning for her, whereas before, within the relationship, they'd been on each side of the bed and she saw it, her side, his side, and, there was that distance there. But once she had control of her bed, if you like, then it kind of matched the control of her life and it became her sanctuary, in her new home,
Wow.
Yeah,
yes.
It had a different meaning altogether.
Altogether.
I think if it was me that was leaving a relationship, I'd probably want to leave the bed behind.
Yeah.
And not
Yep.
not take it. But she had gained a different persona, the bed.
Yes. So, she had her hand on the tiller of that bed that became the boat. You know,
That's
she
right.
was able to steer it.
Yes, she was.
Yes. That's magic.
Yeah. And the other thing, though, with Emma's story is the fact that she was only 68. And, that's a young, older age.
Yes.
Yeah, so she, that might be where she felt at the moment that she had no need of men. But how long would that continue for, whether that would go on. And after a while, loneliness would become a part of her life as well.
Yeah, exactly. And we've sort of talked about that and you've just mentioned it in terms of loneliness. And I would hope that loneliness isn't an inevitable bit of becoming a senior. Sadly, I think it can be.
Yes.
That there is that loneliness aspect to being of a certain age, past a certain age, where you're not able to do all the things that you used to do as a younger person. And that loneliness, I wouldn't like to think it's inevitable, but it is very prevalent, isn't
And
it?
it's sad too. Yes, it is. I think too it's sad that we do put age in terms of numbers. And I remember, I think you said something about turning 60 and then you started to feel as if you were getting into the older age bracket. But I remember reading in the newspapers something about an elderly woman was hit by a car, for example, and I think it was something like that.
Yes.
And then it said that she was 62. And I thought, they're calling a 62-year-old woman elderly. But
Hang on.
It was published. It was in the paper.
Wow.
And wow. I might have been around that age at the time, and I think, wow, I don't feel elderly.
No.
But I've been labelled elderly.
By the numbers.
Yeah.
Just by the numbers. Yeah,
So
exactly.
we've digressed off Emma's story there, but just the same.
Important. Still important.
Yes. So you've been listening to Dr Sue and Fran Cahill, and we've been talking about sexual desire in older age. The focus this week was on part 2 of Emma's story and how she gained control over her sexual life and her bed. Next week, we'll have another story of the experience of sexuality and sexual desire in older age. Thank you, Fran.
Thank you, Dr. Sue.